Pretoria High Court has ruled that load shedding is unconstitutional and a violation of human dignity. The matter was brought by several organizations, political parties, civil society and individuals. They'd asked the court to declare ESKOM's nearly 15 years of power cuts as unconstitutional. The court has also ordered Electricity Minister Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa to ensure that schools, hospitals, clinics and police stations are exempt from rolling blackouts as early as January. The presidency says it is studying the judgment. Let's speak now to build one South Africa, rather. The Deputy President, Nobuntu Webster, joins us in studio. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time this afternoon. You were cited as the fourth respondent in the court papers. Maybe before we get into the overall reaction in terms of this decision, how should we understand your participation in this process?
So, good afternoon and thank you for having us, Dudu. We had been advocating for there to be a solution and intervention as it pertains to load shedding for a while. We had some protests. One of them was outside Baragwanath Hospital, particularly around the issues of important services like healthcare, police stations, education, ensuring that that is not interrupted. The reality is that load shedding has infringed on the rights of South Africans, particularly when you think of school children and how it's affected education. When you think of how it's affected healthcare, there are people who have died as a result. So we've been advocating for this for a while. We then came together with a number of other political parties, trade unions and civil society and brought the matter to court.
So essentially there were two themes, right? I'd like for us to take a look at the second theme, which centers around a review application launched in order to determine whether tariffs whereby ESKOM recovers revenue sufficient to cover its cost of electricity generation and distribution were correctly determined by NERSA, and the court found that the reviews against the NERSA tariff determination were refused. Yeah. What is your understanding of that?
So that is the one where, unfortunately, we were not successful, and the court took its own process in order to be able to determine that, and that's something that we must accept. It is unfortunate for the people of South Africa, because while we still have load shedding, we still then have increasing tariffs, which places a further burden on South Africans. It places a further burden even on businesses and on the economy. So South Africans are still, as a result of that, under the strain economically, not only load shedding, but also economic strain that comes from the increase of those tariffs.
Sure. If we take a look at the judgment, would you characterize it as a win? What will be a win, more so when you speak of protests, when you speak of the tariffs, some of them which are quite burdensome to some sectors of the population? What will be a win?
No, look, absolutely. The judgment, there is victory, great victory in the judgment, because for the court to have ruled that there must be alternative energy, which is made available for the healthcare sector, which is made available for policing, which is made available for education. That is a great win for South Africans. That's a great victory for South Africans. So we absolutely see that aspect of it as a win. It's a win for the people of South Africa, and we're glad that the judiciary responded to what we saw as an infringement on the rights of South Africans. So absolutely, definitely a victory.
All right, so the Electricity Minister has a deadline of January 2024 to, in particular, schools, hospitals, as well as some police stations, to make sure that a plan is made. Given that South Africa received this week, right, a shipment from China, does that go some way in satisfying you guys?
Absolutely not. Really, we can't be at a place where, first of all, there are other, you have to look at that and realize that there are other consequences to being reliant, first of all, on that kind of donation. As a country, getting to a point where we're reliant on those kinds of donations. But also, there's other consequences. You look at the issue of environmental sustainability and other consequences that come from that. Thirdly, it's not enough. It genuinely isn't enough, and there has to be a more sustainable solution towards resolving the load shedding issue. So that's the first one. But as it pertains to this ruling, and as it pertains to what needs to happen, actually when you look at it, the ruling says that alternative energy has to be made available for hospitals, clinics and police stations. Not only does that mean that South Africans are now able to have access to those services uninterrupted, but it's also a solution in and of itself because it reduces the load off the grid. So the reality is that there are numerous pathways, and government has not substantially explored and implemented the numerous pathways that have existed. Since 2007, really the main pathway has been load shedding, and that is not the only way to resolve this crisis.
According to you and your party, what are some of the ways to resolve load shedding? What is it that the government is not doing that you believe should be done?
So first of all, this way, providing alternative energy and ensuring that there's alternative energy that is available for the major services in this country is one way. We have often spoken about and we have provided solutions even around nuclear, and using that as one of the ways. And as you reduce the load, you're also ensuring that there's better capacity, even in the current implementation of electricity. So we've provided numerous solutions, and there are numerous solutions that are at play and that have been provided even by other institutions. It can't just be that load shedding is the only way to be able to resolve this issue. But then you also have to look at the reality of the corruption that has led us to where we are as well. The most important way is making sure that you have the right leadership at ESKOM, because we have not had the right leadership for a long time, and we have had interference by government as it pertains to corruption when you look at the realities of what has happened and the real story of what has happened at ESKOM. So the right leadership is one of the ways, not only at ESKOM but also in government and the various departments that are responsible for energy generation.
Sure. Practically, what does that look like? I ask maybe because the judgment in the order, it says, it is declared that the non-realization of the government's intention in the late 1990s to open the energy sector to competition with private actors and to timelessly implement the independent power producer procurement program, the delays in the decisions and implementations to build Midubi and Gusile power stations, the decisions to run power stations beyond their capabilities without proper maintenance, the failure to ensure or approve sufficient revenue for its services, and the failure to take adequate steps to protect ESKOM from criminal activity, corruption and state capture, individually and collectively, and the resultant energy crisis manifested by load shedding and the continued failure to remedy the crisis, and so it goes. And so when you speak about leadership, for instance, you speak about corruption, what do we need to watch out against? Because you speak to some pundits and they tell you that there is privatization by stealth. There's nothing wrong, they also argue, with including the private sector, but we need to know the terms of the deals that we are getting into, more so for the average Joe Ndlovu on the ground.
So the first issue is that we had Minister Pravin Gordhan appeal the ruling initially, which was calling on government, instructing government to make sure that there's alternative energy. So the first issue is political will. For me, it didn't make sense that you had a minister who is appealing a decision to ensure that there is adequate health care, adequate safety and education, and that these institutions are not affected by load shedding. So you need political will. You actually need to have the right government in place, and you need to have the right leaders in place. That's the first. Secondly, there does need to be transparency, as you speak of, in the process of appointing. I mean, as it stands now, we still don't have an appointment of an ESKOM CEO, and there are other important positions that are still not filled to this point. There needs to be transparency, there needs to be decisiveness, and South Africans need to know that this is taken care of by ministries and a minister that actually is providing direction and is committed to bringing change in this institution and to this very, very crucial issue in our country.
Ma'am, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.